All right, welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us. We are super excited to dive into today's webinar, Bedbugs on the Move, Preparing for Peak Travel Season. My name is Ashley Guzik, and I am a Marketing Communications Manager with Ecolab. I have the pleasure of serving as your moderator today. With the summer travel season right around the corner, we know that means occupancy is about to spike, and with it, your bedbug risk. We're excited to share practical steps that you can take to reduce that risk. As we dive in, I would like to note that all phone lines and audio will be muted during today's webinar. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat on the right-hand side of your screen. We will answer questions during an open Q&A at the end of today's webinar. Today, we're going to arm you with what you need to stay ahead of the curve. We'll cover what peak season means for your operations, the biology that you need to know, and practical steps to reduce risk, including treatment options and how the right partnership makes all the difference. We'll close out our time with that Q&A session that I mentioned earlier. And as a reminder, I invite you to use your chat to submit questions throughout the webinar. Now, I would like to introduce today's speakers. Maddy Lee is Ecolab Pest Elimination's Assistant Marketing Manager. Maddy manages our hospitality businesses, including hotels, vacation resorts, and cruise ships, as well as healthcare businesses such as long-term care and acute care facilities. She will be taking us through some upcoming summer events and the risks they pose to business, as well as the key role for property managers to be effective. Morgan Manderfield is a senior entomologist on Ecolab Pest Elimination's research and development team. She has a master's degree in entomology from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and is a board-certified entomologist. In her current role, Morgan serves on a team of scientists who develop and commercialize new innovations and science-based protocols. She will highlight bedbug biology, bedbug treatment options, and risk mitigation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Maddy to take us away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley. So with that, I will go ahead and jump into what this upcoming summer travel season means for your business. And so before we do our deeper dive into bedbugs themselves, I just wanted to set the stage with some context for the season and how this is set to impact your business. So as we're heading into summer, we know travel momentum is going to begin to pick up. In some places it already is. And with that comes increased guest movement. And this summer in particular, we're expecting a number of variables to impact that. One of the most talked about drivers is the World Cup. Coming to 16 major metro areas across North America this summer, it's expected to have a big impact on the travel season. And so even though we expect travel to concentrate in those major metro areas, many travel planning analysts are expecting multi-city travel both before and after games throughout North America rather than just visiting one location. And at the same time, many states across the U.S. are expecting increased travel to historical destinations and around holiday weekends. And so when you take those two and then layer them on top of regularly scheduled summer travel, it makes for a very busy summer with increased guest movement and more turnover across your property. And so this also sets the stage for increased bedbug movement as well. And as Morgan will dive much deeper into later, bedbugs are hitchhiker pests. And so all of this increased travel creates more opportunities for them to move from place to place. And so what that means for you as property managers operationally, first, incidents often lead to room downtime. They'll take rooms out of service, increase the likelihood you might have to move guests around. And so we know this is a challenge, especially during peak occupancy periods. And so with those rooms out of service, it can take a while to get them back up while inspections and treatments and follow-ups are all completed. Secondly, there's a direct revenue impact here. So we've seen industry research that shows that incidents can cost up to $6,000 an incident when you factor in, again, those treatment, room downtime, furniture replacement cost, and all of those costs that you typically associate with a bed bug incident. And what all of that leads to is it can impact the guest experience and possibly your brand reputation. Um, Studies have also shown that a negative guest review can potentially reduce room rates up to $38 a night, which during travel seasons like this, we know can add up quickly. Um, so really the takeaway here is that bed bugs can create operational disruption, brand risk, but there are absolutely steps that you can take to help mitigate some of that risk. And with that, I'll jump into the next slide to set the stage for the rest of the presentation. So Morgan will go much deeper into all of these three categories throughout the remainder of the presentation, but just to give some set the stage here a little bit. So the first thing that you can do at a property is to educate your staff. They are the first line of defense, and it's important that they're aware of how to identify issues and signs of activities and know what to do in case of an incident. And they also play a role in making sure that harborage areas are minimized throughout your property where possible. And then lastly, the importance of partnering with a pest professional. We know property managers play a large role in demonstrating due diligence if bed bug activity is identified. So this really means that partnering with a professional to schedule treatment, inspection, and then those follow-up treatments and ensuring proper documentation is kept is critical. So with that, I will pass it over to Morgan to do a deeper dive into behavior, biology, and treatment options.
Thank you so much, Maddy, for the introduction there and setting the stage. So I will go ahead and get us started with the public health significance of bed bugs. Interestingly, bed bugs are not just limited to hotels, right? So although I'm sure we have a large representation here today from the hotel industry, they can be found in so many other places. Of course, where people live, such as multi-unit housing and long-term care facilities, these are reservoirs for bed bug infestations. And these particular types of properties can present unique challenges because bed bugs will often travel to adjacent rooms and in heavy infestations in particular. Further, finding a way to shuffle people around and evacuate rooms while treatment is happening can sometimes be difficult. Beyond that, virtually anywhere that people travel to and sit for extended periods of time can serve as spreading points for bed bugs. So this includes, and I hate to scare everybody here, but movie theaters, offices of all kinds, acute care facilities as well, acute health care, public transportation, and even restaurants, again, just because there's seating here. And we've even seen bed bug infestations occur in outdoor seating when the temperature is warm enough. Retail spaces are also under a unique threat from bed bugs, as these hitchhiking pests can be found on return items. And finally, I just want to make a note about stereotypes here. Although it's really commonly believed that bed bugs are a pest of the unsanitary, that's not true. Anybody can pick up bed bugs from out in a public place and bring them home or bring them to their place of employment or a restaurant and so forth. So really all it takes is a warm body, because that's what bed bugs are attracted to. Now, regarding their status as a public health pest, bed bugs are classified as public health pests by the Environmental Protection Agency, as well as other similar agencies in other countries. And usually public health pests are given that designation because they are disease spreaders. And bed bugs are not disease spreaders. So there's currently no evidence of disease transmission by bed bugs to people. However, they're given this distinction for several other very valid reasons. So the first is, of course, the most obvious, the fact that they bite, and they can really leave large, itchy, irritating welts that last for several days or even weeks in some people. But these bite reactions range. So some people have no reaction whatsoever. Other people react quite severely. And those reactions can even be delayed. So one person might, experience a bedbug exposure and not have that reaction show up until several weeks later. These bites can be clustered together, they can be spread into a line, they can be a single bite. It really does vary quite significantly. And roughly half the population doesn't have any reaction whatsoever to bedbug bites. So people might have an infestation or may have had an exposure and not even realize that it occurred. Elderly people are even less likely to react than the general population, so that can be particularly challenging for assisted living facilities and other elder care type properties. A specific note here about bedbug bites, though, is that because everybody reacts differently, they are not identifiable. So there is simply no way to look at a bite or like a skin reaction and determine if it was caused by a bedbug. And even a medical diagnosis is generally determined by situational or anecdotal evidence. So the doctor might ask, did you travel recently? Have you purchased any secondhand furniture? Things like that to reach that diagnosis. So the only way to know if it was bed bugs that caused the bite is to thoroughly inspect that room and monitor for bed bug activity over time. In addition to their bites, they have a number of other distressing impacts, including respiratory allergies from their fecal material and other debris, as well as generalized fear and anxiety and impacted sleep due to people being bitten in their most vulnerable time while asleep. And there are even officially recognized mental disorders relating to bedbugs, including PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. So as we can see, although they're not disease transmitters, their impact on people's emotional well-being is significant, which is why they should be taken seriously. So what can we do to reassure guests during a bedbug incident? We have some encouraged methods to lean on, including informing a guest that a pest management professional will be contacted immediately. Requesting photos as well is a good thing to do to retain that evidence to then provide to your pest management professional. And even if you can get the specimen itself, I know that sounds a little icky, but if you're able to, store that specimen, keep it on the side for your pest management professional to identify, that would be ideal. And offering empathy and solutions. So bedbugs are inherently distressing, and we've found that, people who are experiencing what they really want is reassurance. They want to know that something is being done about this, that somebody is taking it seriously because it is a serious issue. However, we want to avoid certain things like attempting to diagnose or speculating on bites. As I just mentioned, they are not identifiable. I cannot identify them as an entomologist. My doctor can't, concretely identify them either. So we should avoid attempting to diagnose or saying it does or doesn't look like bedbugs to me. Additionally, avoid attempting to diagnose or identify the insect. So if they show you a photo of an insect, maybe you don't believe that it's a bedbug, leave that to the professionals. Again, any instance of dismissal or, hey, I don't think that's a bedbug would probably not come off very well to that guest. We want to leave that information to the professionals. And again, just in general, minimizing guest anxieties or minimizing their experience in any way, even if we have reason to believe that it's not a bedbug, again, wholly distressing experience that we want to offer empathy and solutions for. So my favorite part as the entomologist, the bedbug biology. Let's talk a little bit about what they do and how they behave. So here on the left-hand side, we have a photo of bedbugs at various life stages, including their egg all the way to the left, all the way up to and a fully grown adult. And then on the far right, we have a fully fed adult bug. And so as you can see, their abdomens grow in size when they're fully fed. But all life stages here are visible. So they're very, very small, but common to, it's a common misconception that they are microscopic or not visible. So we can see all life stages here, just quite small. They are nocturnal ectoparasites, which means they live outside of the body. They're not an endoparasite, they're an ecto, outside the body of the host, and they live in our environments. And nocturnal, of course, meaning they're active at night, but not always. So for example, if we have a night shift person, their bed bugs at their home would probably be feeding during the day because that's when their meal is most readily available to them. They do prefer human blood, but not require it, so they can potentially feed on other warm-blooded animals if their preferred host of people is not available. They do require a blood meal. So after hatching from the egg, bedbugs have 5 immature stages that they progress through before becoming an adult, and a meal is required in between each of those stages. So they feed and then grow and then feed and then grow. Their life cycle is about 6 weeks, and those eggs hatch after about 7 to 10 days. So an adult female will lay an egg, and about a week later that egg hatches. And then in an ideal situation, 6 weeks later, you can have a fully grown adult bedbug that is able to reproduce. Adult females lay about 8 eggs per day and up to 200 in her lifetime. So what does all that mean together? Basically, it means that if a bedbug, an adult female who's carrying eggs is brought into your facility, she can lay those eggs, and then within about 6 weeks, you have a fully reproductive population of bedbugs that can grow exponentially from there. So it doesn't take all that much time. Finally, they can live without a blood meal for many months. So you might have read up to a year or even longer, and that's true. But I do want to be clear that it's really heavily dependent on temperature and humidity and other environmental conditions. So a year is kind of like ideal situation for the bed bug, but that's usually at about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So in normal household conditions or ambient conditions that we keep our facilities at, bed bugs typically perish after about 3 to 5 months without a meal. And that's still a really, really long time. So not quite a year, but 3 to 5 months is long enough that we can't simply starve them out of a room, for example. So more details about their behavior. Bedbugs prefer dark cracks and crevices near their host, so usually within about 5 feet of the resting spot, whether that's a bed or a couch. They are excellent hitchhikers. So they crawl, they don't fly, they don't jump, but they are very, very good at hiding in personal belongings and on people's clothing to move from place to place. In general, they like rough textured surfaces. They love fabric. They can't climb smooth surfaces very easily, but it's important to note that what looks smooth to us might not be smooth at the microscopic, like bedbug level. So they are unable to climb truly smooth surfaces, but even if it looks smooth, they might still be able to climb it. They're attracted to a combination of heat, carbon dioxide, which we exhale, and other human body odors. However, they can only sense these cues from a few feet away, so it's not as if they are being pulled in from really, really great distances by these things. If the opportunity arises, they'll feed about on a weekly basis, but could be as frequently as every 3 days or so. And after feeding, bedbugs immediately return back to those cracks and crevices to hide, and they will quickly begin mating and depositing eggs. And these places where bedbugs gather are called harborages. They deposit pheromones here. They communicate to other bugs that this is a safe place to rest. And you can see some examples here on the left of what a bedbug harborage looks like. So we have on the left-hand side a mattress tuft with live bugs. We have eggs. We have cast skins. So when they grow and they molt, they leave a skin behind. On the bottom right there, that's another example of what a bedbug skin or exoskeleton would look like. And the spotting, the fecal spotting, is the most obvious sign that they leave behind. So bedbug feces is a liquid, and they deposit it as a liquid. So on a fabric surface like this, it sort of looks like a magic marker or a Sharpie like blot that has bled into the fabric. So one of the big reasons why I'm sure many of us are here is how can we mitigate bedbug risk? Unfortunately, I wish I could say that there was a way to completely prevent bedbugs from entering your facility. In most businesses, that's just not feasible because of how they travel, right? Bedbugs, they're brought in on guests, they're brought in on personal belongings, they live amongst where we live. And that's the nature of many of our businesses, right? Hotels, assisted living facilities, we simply cannot prevent them from ever entering, but we can mitigate our risk of introductions becoming full-blown infestations. So how do we do that? One of the first things, and really the front line of defense, is by educating our staff and residents. So being able to identify the signs of bedbug activity that we just went over, and being able to perform routine inspections of those guest rooms is really, as I said, the first line of defense. When staff knows how to recognize the signs, there's a much greater chance of catching bedbugs early on and eliminating them before they truly grow out of hand. It's also important to have an action plan and know that action plan, which I'll describe in more detail here shortly. The next thing that we can do is to inspect incoming furniture, especially if it's used or if it's been stored somewhere, or especially if it's coming from a facility or a place that has had bedbug activity in the past. Additionally, minimizing the movement of furniture between rooms. Obviously, this happens sometimes, but if there's been a history of infestation there, we want to minimize that movement, and it's why keeping good service records, knowing when and where infestations have happened is also a good idea. In multi-unit housing and assisted living facilities and places where used furniture is, one of the primary ways that bedbugs are brought into the facility. So educating residents about this risk is really important. Dumpster diving is something that I did when I was in college, and looking back on that, I would not do that again because of the risk of bedbugs. We know that this is, again, it's just a common way that people get their furniture. Facebook Marketplace. These are very bedbug risky behaviors. So again, educating residents about these risks. If secondhand furniture is unavoidable, at the very least, we want to be inspecting these items thoroughly before they're coming into the facility. Reducing harborage areas. We talked about harborage areas and what those are and what they look like. So the ways that we can reduce these are routine, thorough vacuuming of guest and patient rooms, and focusing on those areas where bedbugs occur, such as the cracks and crevices, seams and edges of furniture, carpet edges, baseboards. And speaking of those cracks and crevices, reducing those as well whenever possible. So pasting down, peeling wallpaper, minimizing these hidden crevices where bedbugs thrive is another way to be proactive. Now, this may not be a decision that everybody on this call is able to make. However, in case we do have some of those folks here with us, avoiding elaborate decor or elaborate furniture is another really good way to both reduce bedbug harborage areas and make bedbug treatments more effective. So bed construction has really become a lot more elaborate over time, often with integrated outlets and lighting. Bedbugs will frustratingly harbor in these crevices, and it really makes inspections more challenging if we can't access those cracks and crevices. Finally, mattress encasements. This is a great way to reduce bedbug harborage. It denies bedbugs access to some of their favorite hiding places, and it allows for more streamlined inspections. So we'll talk more about mattress encasements later. Limiting personal items. Now, I know this isn't entirely possible for certain facilities, where people live, they have to bring their personal items. When people are traveling to hotels, they have to bring their personal items. But whenever possible, limiting staff, guest, and resident personal items in certain areas or on site. And if they can't be limited, then providing solutions to isolate or treat personal belongings. This is great in office spaces, in restaurants as well, when people bring in their personal belongings, having ways to isolate those so that they're not, spreading bed bugs to other areas in the facility is great. Be cautious of high-risk items such as linens, pillows, walkers, and wheelchairs. These are often not thought about, when it comes to bed bugs, but they're ways that bed bugs can spread throughout a facility. So be mindful of those. And finally, partnering with a professional. So as I mentioned, that action plan, we recommend having an action plan for what to do for your particular facility if bedbug activity is suspected or confirmed. So what that means is, what immediate actions do I take? What steps do I take? Who do I talk to? What staff should be informed? What do I do with that room? What do I do with that guest? And information for contacting your service provider. All of that should be documented so that if anybody has a bedbug situation or suspected situation, they know exactly what to do. Maintaining detailed service records, including the action plan, as well as your service records. So this is really important in the event of litigation. those service records might come back up to be able to prove, yes, we are, doing all that we can for this bedbug incident, and, we've resolved it to the best of our ability. Do not attempt to do it yourself. I'll discuss this in more detail later, but in short, these methods largely are ineffective, and they open your business up to litigation risk. And finally, establishing proactive professional inspections and treatments whenever possible is a great way to truly reduce the risk of those introductions becoming infestations and protecting your property in the event of litigation. So there are a multitude of treatment options available for bed bugs. Generally speaking, an approach that utilizes multiple of these strategies is going to be best, or rather, not a one size fits all situation, because not every situation is going to be the same. So I'll talk about some of those treatments, pros and cons, and what they are. So as far as inspecting and monitoring for bed bugs, visual inspection by a trained professional remains one of the most common and reliably effective means of bedbug inspections. So these are generally cost effective, they're discreet, they're, if done well, they're very thorough, and it always helps to have an expert eye verify that suspected bedbug activity. Of course, those daily cursory inspections by staff are really important, but a professional visual inspection is really thorough. They really get in there and they flip furniture and they look at all those cracks and crevices. And it's really great. Additionally, we have canine scent detection. In the same way that canines can be trained to detect narcotics or explosives, they can also be trained to detect the unique odor of bedbug pheromones. This can be pretty time efficient. For example, you can have a canine run a large area in a pretty short amount of time. However, one thing to be mindful of is that they are less discreet. Of course, guests might be put on edge a little bit if you have a canine come through, especially if they're not sure, is it narcotics, is it explosives, or is it bugs? None of which are great. And additionally, the accuracy does vary. So there are some studies out there that were done, and the accuracy of this service does depend pretty heavily on that canine handler relationship, their training, their depth of training, environmental factors, day-to-day variability, and so on. There's also some interesting technology that exists out there to use DNA or protein swabbing to identify or confirm or deny if suspicious spotting is bedbug fecal material. So this can be in a kit form where you get rapid results. So you kind of swab a surface and it tells you yes or no, this is bedbug fecal material, or it can be sent to the lab for analysis. This is a tool in the toolbox. I would, not say that this is a replacement for professional visual inspection or canine scent detection, but it is something that can be used in those niche scenarios where we need to understand, is this suspicious spotting bedbug related? It's not at this time able to distinguish new versus old. So that's why it's, again, a tool in the toolbox, and it might not be useful in all scenarios. Finally, monitoring devices. So these are a great way to kind of monitor over time. They can be left behind to provide sort of like an ongoing inspection. Monitors can be either passive or active, and that means they either use an attractant or they don't. So a passive lure, or a passive monitor kind of just sits there. It's designed for bedbugs to kind of fall into or get trapped in. And it's important to place those in areas where bedbugs are likely to naturally move. Whereas an active monitor utilizes a lure, an attractant of some kind, whether that's heat or CO2 or a chemical, to draw bedbugs in from around. And again, recalling from earlier, bedbugs are not able to detect from super far away, so it's really only going to be effective in maybe a 2 to 5 foot radius. They can also be connected or not connected. So connected monitors are somewhat new to the market, relatively, and they are devices which detect or capture a bug and then send a digital alert to either an app or an email inbox or a dashboard to inform the user of suspected activity in that room. So there are some important questions to ask when you are considering using monitoring devices in your facility. They might include, how discreet is it? Is discretion really important important in your facility? What's the level of maintenance required? So passive monitors are going to require less maintenance than an active monitor, which might require lure replacement. And then who is responsible for that maintenance? So is that going to be your staff members? Is that going to be your pest management professional? That's a conversation that needs to have between those parties. Regarding treatments. So chemical treatment is considered the most conventional, but there are also some biochemical treatments that fit into this general category as well. So biochemical meaning products that use a naturally occurring or biologically derived active ingredient. These can be plant-based, these can be fungus-based, but they all tend to kind of fall in the same category, and they're applied in similar ways. So not all products are created equal. So some products are repellent to bugs and may make infestations worse by pushing them to new areas. And then other products have varying efficacy, so they perform better or worse than others. So it's important for property managers to avoid using, well, we'll talk about DIY in a moment, but avoid any of those products in general. But it's important for pest management providers to understand that, not every product is created equal and select products accordingly. Ultimately, different products are going to have their ideal, best use case scenarios. So again, it's not a one size fits all situation. Efficacy is important, of course. Room reentry time is also a factor. So not all products have the same room reentry time. Some of them require the guest or resident or staff be vacated for 4+ hours. Others are, you can reenter that room once dry. So your pest management provider should be able to provide those guidelines to you. Residual longevity is also really important. So some products will last a month, some will last 3 months, some will last indefinitely. And again, this is all something that you can have a conversation with your pest management provider about. Multiple active ingredients is preferred. So in the same way that medicines have different active ingredients, pesticides have different active ingredients. And in situations where only one active ingredient is used in an environment over and over and over again, in the same way that microbial resistance can happen, insecticide resistance can happen with insects. And so it's really important that multiple active ingredients are used in these protocols so that insecticide resistance is mitigated. And in situations where insecticide resistance is already present, there are multiple active ingredients that can thoroughly get after that entire population of insects. Follow-up services are essential. Why? Because bedbug eggs are very hardy and generally very difficult to kill with chemistry. So recalling that bedbugs their eggs hatch within about a week. Follow-up services allow us to go back to specifically target any of those young nymphs that have hatched in that time and perform an inspection to make sure that, if there were any eggs that hatched in that time, we can apply a follow-up service to get after those. Some non-chemical options are available as well. So heat is a really common method. It can be either structural or enclosed. Structural means a professional will bring in a large industrial grade heater to an infested room and heat it for many, many hours. So there's no containment here. And this option, I just want to be very clear, is not DIY-able. So this definitely does require professional training. It can be easy to get wrong, and furniture and structures can be damaged in worst case scenarios. So by contrast, though, there is also enclosed heat, and this entails bringing in kind of a tent or a structure and loading in infested furniture into the enclosure and then heating that enclosure. And one benefit of this is that bed bugs are not able to migrate to different areas. So through structural heat, because there's no containment, bed bugs could potentially migrate to other areas. They're very good at finding cracks and crevices and traveling along, electrical outlets to adjacent areas. With enclosed heat, that is much less likely to happen. However, a drawback of enclosed heat is that the rest of the room still does need to be treated, typically with chemistry. Both steam and freezing are an option. I just want to note here, I'm not endorsing any brands. These are some industry standard tools. But these are green options, meaning there's, in a situation where chemistry can't be used or shouldn't be used, these are effective tools that will eliminate bed bugs without the use of chemistry. So handheld devices exist which either put out steam or they put out frozen CO2. And again, these can be effective, but they typically don't penetrate deep into furniture. So if you have a heavily upholstered item, you may not be able to penetrate those items pretty deeply with these handheld devices. Conventional freezer is an option for treating small infested items such as personal belongings. However, these items must be bagged and left for a minimum of 4 days at 0 degrees Fahrenheit to achieve total mortality, including eggs and all the different life stages. Vacuuming is another useful tool for professionals and non-professionals, as I mentioned earlier, as part of those daily routine inspections. Daily thorough vacuuming of cracks and crevices helps reduce those harborages. But it's a great tool for professionals as well to remove, especially heavy infestations. It's widely used tool by professionals during the initial treatment and is typically followed up with another type of treatment such as residual chemistry. Finally, mattress encasements. These, I want to be clear, are not an elimination tool. These don't kill bed bugs. These don't eliminate bed bugs. But they do protect the mattress from future bed bug activity, and they protect that mattress from needing to be discarded. So if you have a bed bug situation, instead of throwing out the mattress to get rid of all those bugs and, especially if there's heavy fecal staining, instead what you can do is proactively, especially, install a mattress encasement. And that way, if there is bed bug activity, that encasement can be removed and laundered and replaced, and without needing to replace that mattress, which is much more expensive than the encasement. Not all encasements are created equal. So some encasements are more durable, some are easier to install. And their closure mechanism is really, really important because bed bugs are so tiny, they can squeeze through the tiniest crack and crevice, including a zipper closure. So we highly recommend mattress encasements that have specific bed bug claims on them, that they are bed bug proof, and not all encasements are bed bug proof. So I've mentioned DIY treatments. I realize that this sounds a little self-serving coming from a pest control provider, but very truthfully, and the scientific literature backs this up, DIY or do-it-yourself treatments are largely speaking ineffective. So why is this? Store-bought products or products that are available off the shelf that don't require a professional license for, they often utilize active ingredients that bedbug populations are resistant to. And this makes sense because people, they have a bedbug problem, they buy whatever product is on the shelf, and they treat their bugs with it. And those are the active ingredients that are used repeatedly, time over time over time. And as we mentioned, insecticide resistance, that's how that works. That's how that develops. Further, professional grade products are typically of a higher quality, and most of them require specialized training to effectively use. A lot of store-bought products also have no residual activity, and they are kill on contact only, which means they leave no residual behind. They kill only the bugs that you see. And as we discussed, bed bugs are super good at hiding. So if you're only killing the bugs that you can see, there's an entire population that you are missing. Store-bought products often contain repellent active ingredients, so they irritate bugs and cause them to move around into unpredictable places, which can complicate treatment and often can have that spread to adjacent rooms as well. So that's the efficacy part of it, but really this is also a litigation issue. So there's an increased risk of injury to your staff with do-it-yourself methods. And unfortunately, the news headlines are just full of stories of business employees and homeowners harming themselves or creating liability issues, patrons, or harming structures when they attempt do-it-yourself methods. So it's understandable that bed bugs are panic-inducing, and we want to get rid of them as quickly as possible. But this is something that we want to take really seriously and definitely leave to the professionals. Speaking of litigation, they, either from exposing staff and guests to risk, that's an increase in litigation risk. But it also is a litigation risk when it comes to demonstrating that proper and thorough treatment was performed. So if you have a bedbug incident and do-it-yourself methods were attempted, it becomes less likely to prove that, yes, we did all that we in our power to make sure that this was dealt with efficiently and thoroughly. And that's why we really want to lean on professionals to do this work. Yeah. So I'm going to leave us off with developing a partnership. What does that look like? So, what can your pest management professional offer you and what you should expect from that partnership? So when you're choosing a pest management professional, it's prudent to ask, does this person or this company have experience with this uniquely challenging pest? So not all pest management providers specialize in bed bugs. Not all of them have bed bug experience. They're going to be varying degrees of experience levels with this. So ask them, what's your experience level with this? How long have you been doing this? How do you handle this? To really gauge their knowledge and their experience with this pest. We recommend looking for a provider that provides proactive solutions. So this whole presentation has really been about proactivity and what can we do ahead of time to mitigate our risk. So you want to look for somebody who can offer you a proactive solution. They should also be able to provide educational materials and training opportunities to your staff. So as mentioned, property staff are the first line of defense against bedbugs. So your provider should be able to empower them with the knowledge and the tools and the training that they need to be able to perform those daily cursory inspections and to know what bedbugs look like and what the signs are. You might also want a provider that provides thorough inspection services. So as mentioned, there's cursory inspections, but a really good pest management professional will provide these really deep, thorough inspections, getting in there, flipping furniture, and looking in truly every crack and crevice that they can to confirm bedbug activity. Consider selecting a professional that uses a combination of chemical and non-chemical means of control, and as well as one that inspects adjacent rooms and areas. So again, there's no silver bullet when it comes to bed bugs. It's not really going to work with just one control type, one solution type. We really need to come at this with all of the tools in the toolbox at times. And again, adjacent areas, not just focusing on guest rooms. We want to make sure that we're providing, inspections for the whole property because bed bugs spread, they move around. And as we discussed, follow-up treatments and inspections. So it's critical that your provider provides follow-up inspections. As mentioned, those eggs take time to hatch. So it's not usually a one and done. We really want to get back in there and make sure that we got the job done. Regardless of the treatments performed, you want a pest management professional that provides detailed service documentation. This is super, super important for litigation. And with the heightened awareness of bed bugs and the potential for litigation, proper documentation will protect you and will support you in the instance of any potential challenges that may arise. It also helps provide accountability between you and your provider. So if you suspect that something wasn't done according to your standards, those service records are a great document to lean on to say, was this done appropriately? Is this meeting our standards? And so forth. Just really nailing this down. This documentation piece is really important. So this is what to look for on your service report when you're provided a bedbug service report. You want to see the name of the provider there, the service date, the details of that inspection. So what did they find? The rooms and the areas treated really specifically here, right? Room numbers should be included here, as well as products applied. This is often mandated by law in many areas. And any follow-up recommendations. So if they have any notes for you about what should be discarded or what should be moved, or if there are future areas that need to be treated, all these details should be documented there. Oh, the service agreement. So in addition to your documentation, many pest management professionals will provide a service agreement, and this outlines expectations and responsibilities for both the provider and the property. Again, getting after that accountability. So it's important to be familiar with these requirements as it will both inform and protect all parties in the event of any, bedbug services, any issue of litigation. Room tracking. So as discussed earlier, professional, proactive inspections and treatments are one of the best ways to reduce your risk of introductions becoming infestations, particularly in these high-risk properties like hotels and healthcare. But effectively tracking those proactive rooms can be challenging, and it's really critical to ensure consistent coverage across the entire property. So, it can be challenging, especially in situations where there's a really large property with a large number of rooms, or if your property is really high occupancy. So getting into every single room multiple times per year can be challenging. It can be difficult to know which rooms have been treated or not. So digital room rotation tracking might be a helpful tool for your property. There are tools available which ensure each room is serviced with a consistent cadence, which also allow for prioritization of rooms. So, when your provider arrives, you both can know which rooms are most due for service, so which rooms have been treated least recently. And of course, this provides strength in documentation for additional support in liability protection. I want to leave us here with some further education and resources for you and your staff. So the Bedbug Toolkit is a really great landing page for all kinds of things bedbug related for Ecolab. We have infographics, we have training tools, we have our ebook there, as well as links to our specific service offerings if you have questions about that. So if you remember nothing else, bedbugtoolkit.com is where you can find additional resources. And eventually, I believe this webinar will show up there as well. So that is all that I have. I'm going to hand it over to Ashley, who will moderate our Q&A for us.
Thank you so much, Morgan. Really appreciate it. I agree with some of the chat that came in. Definitely super itchy after this conversation, but lots of really valuable content. We are ready to open up our session. So thank you to those of you who have submitted questions. If you have additional questions, please continue to pop them in the Q&A or in the chat. We're monitoring both. But I'll just get us started here. We have a question here that is, what is the best way to handle guests that we strongly suspect of lying about bed bugs in order to receive a free room?
Great question. Unfortunately, that is a reality of, the times that we live in. And it's something that, we as Ecolab service providers, we don't deal with directly, but we have heard so many times, especially hotel and vacation properties, that this is a problem. So one thing that we have heard our clients do is keep a registry of any time there is a bedbug incident that you document, you provide the names and all that stuff. I wouldn't advertise that that's what you're doing, that this is a registry to make sure that they're not doing anything criminal or fraudulent. But in that moment, it does help demonstrate that you are taking their request seriously. You're documenting their name. You're providing a demonstration that you are documenting this. And then on the back end, if you see some repeat offenders, that might, cue you in. And even I've heard of clients sharing that registry with others in their network because, even a competitor might have had, somebody repeat over time, and that might be valuable information to you. So sharing that information is something that we've heard has been quite valuable. That being said, I want to echo that in the moment with this guest, if you suspect fraud, it's probably not the time in the moment right there to address that. But again, just covering your bases and documenting everything, and then corroborating that with your registry or with your information in the back end.
Thank you so much, Morgan. We had one come in through the chat, so I'm going to just shift my attention here. Is boric acid in powder form effective with bed bugs?
That's a great question. It is not. So for those unfamiliar, boric acid is a dust product. And it's very effective for German cockroaches and other cockroaches, but the way that it works is it has to be ingested. So insects like cockroaches will walk across the surface where that dust has been applied, and then they will groom themselves. They will like lick that dust all over off of their bodies. Bed bugs don't groom in that way. They don't have the mouth parts to be able to do that. They groom kind of just by like brushing themselves off. So because they're not ingesting that product, they are not being impacted by that product. So short answer is no. That was the long technical answer, but yeah, short answer, no.
Thank you so much, Morgan.
Yeah.
All right, another one from our Q&A. We've heard that you can kill bed bugs by increasing the temperature in the infested room via HVAC. Is that true?
That's a good question. And, sometimes as a service provider, we walk into a room that's been flagged for bed bugs and we show up to perform the inspection or treatment. And it's so hot because the client has turned up their room super, super hot because they've heard that, doing that is lethal to bed bugs. And unfortunately, that doesn't work. The lethal bedbug temperature is about 113 to 118 degrees Fahrenheit, somewhere in that range. And we hold that for a significant period of time. And unfortunately, most rooms are, well, maybe fortunately, maybe it's a good thing that rooms aren't able to get up that hot very easily. What's really happening there is you're heating up parts of the room, but you're not heating the entire room. And bed bugs are super sensitive to temperature changes. So once they detect that room temperature go up, that's when they will start to hide and they'll migrate to the cooler spots in the room, and they can evade, the lethal heat change by hiding in cracks and crevices. And this is actually a way to actually push them further into less treatable areas. And it's a way to push them into adjacent areas because they are fleeing from that temperature rise.
Thank you. I like the comment, in Florida, they can get close just
That's true.
their natural
Yes,
temperature.
I know. Yes, it does get quite warm. But honestly, even in the most, really, really hot climates, it might work in Florida in a car because it's an enclosed space and they have fewer places to go. But certainly not in a structure. It's just not feasible to get every crevice in that room up to lethal temperature.
100%, Morgan.
Yeah.
I like this question just because personally I'm a big fan of just dryer sheets for all of the myriad of things that they're good for, even outside of this question here. But I heard that putting dryer sheets in the corners of the bed mattress helps prevent bed bugs. Is that correct or true?
It is not, unfortunately. I wish it were true because that would really help. But bed bugs are extremely driven by their hunger, and there's nothing in dryer sheets that is lethal or irritating enough to bed bug to win out over hunger. So it might be true that, if you have a bed bug introduced in that space, they might prefer to harbor somewhere else, but they're still going to harbor in that space. And really, when it comes down to it, if a dryer sheet is between a bed bug and its meal, it will cross that dryer sheet to get to its meal.
Doesn't get to go in the win column for my dryer sheets.
No, unfortunately.
I also like this question. How fast do they crawl on your personal belongings? And the example was given if you're at the movie or you're in a room that has one, like how fast could they hitchhike?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's a bit tough to answer. I will say that I've said this before, that bed bugs are not heat-seeking missiles. So they don't torpedo at us when we enter a space, but we are, we're a big source of heat. And so like a movie theater is a great example. If you sit down in a chair and there are bed bugs, below you somewhere, and they're hungry, your body heat is extremely attractive to them. So if they are close to you, like in a 2 to 5 foot radius, and they are hungry, they will be driven and motivated by your heat and by your CO2 and by other body odors. But again, it's really only within a small radius. And if it's when they're hungry, interestingly, bed bugs, when they're hungry, highly motivated to find food. And so they're very mobile during this time. A fed bed bug. So let's just say you sat down in that movie theater chair and that bed bug had recently fed, it's going to hunker down and it's not going to care about you at all. So it really is dependent on a lot of factors, mostly how recently has that bug fed and how close to you in that environment is the bug.
Thank you so much, Morgan. There were two that came in through the chat that also kind of connect to one in our Q&A. So I'm going to read the Q&A one and acknowledge the two comments in the chat. So the Q&A is, how can we minimize risk of spreading an infestation to new rooms if we have a guest that we had to relocate due to bed bugs?
Yeah, really important question, because this is so common where you have a guest, especially like in a hotel, they said there were bed bugs in my room, I want a new room. And so you put them up in a new room. What do you then do about that new room? So I would say from a business perspective and from like an empathy and care perspective, we don't necessarily want to treat them as if they are a biohazard and tell them they can't go, across the facility, or they, not accommodate them. We certainly want to accommodate them. But when they leave, treating those spaces that you've put them up in as if they could potentially be infested. So I think the most conservative thing to do and the most, risk averse thing to do would be to schedule a professional inspection in that room that you moved them to. Additionally, you might consider offering them some free services to treat their laundry. So launder their laundry like for free. So that way, if they are carrying bed bugs with them and their belongings, whatever new place that you put them in is they're less likely to bring them with them.
A part of that, would placing their belongings in a freezer be effective?
That's a really good question, and it is a tool that I have used many times. So I will say it does depend. So the lethal freezing temperature for bed bugs is 0 degrees Fahrenheit for 4 days. That kills all life stages, including the eggs. Now, if it's colder than that, it might take less time. If it's warmer than that, they might survive. And so it really does depend on how cold that freezer can get. A lot of conventional freezers can reach 0 degrees. It might help to get a little temperature probe and put it in there to know what your freezer, how cold it gets. But yes, placing personal belongings or other items that can't be put in a dryer, for example, that can be an effective way to get rid of bed bugs of all life stages, given that the proper temperature and time requirements are met.
Thank you so much, Morgan. All right, I think we have time for one more. I see. Maybe we have time for two. I like the other question that came through too. But as you even just said, like, so this incident happened. Now we have to have our proactive service come out to take a look. What should we be expecting our professional pest service provider to be doing? What should we be looking for them to be doing?
Yes. Yeah. Great question. I love the accountability question there. It is really important because, as I mentioned, not every professional does this the same, and quality is going to vary, of course. Everybody does it a bit differently. So it's really important that your professional is, again, for those really thorough inspections, to be flipping furniture and truly looking at cracks and crevices. I mean, if they get in there and then they're in there for 5 minutes, I would probably doubt the thoroughness of that job, right? Removing headboards. I actually saw somebody in the comment section say that you gotta remove those headboards. So that's one thing that I would look for in a professional who's performing an inspection. And then as far as the service, unfortunately, for legal reasons, we as professionals are not you all are not allowed to be in there when we are doing the service. I know that can be frustrating for people who kind of want to know what's going on in there. But that's why those detailed service records are super important. So although you can't be present in the room when that professional is performing that work for safety reasons and legal reasons, you want to check out that service report to see where were you, what did you apply, what do you recommend, and any other service notes. And recommendations, really being able to answer questions that you have while on site, and make recommendations for you about, how to move your guests around or your residents around. And yeah, just clear and thorough communication.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, one last question, because we're just on a laundry theme right now, Morgan. Does regular laundering of clothing work to get rid of bed bugs, or does the temperature of water or type of detergent matter?
That's a great question. So I would say that heat is really the gold standard here. So a lot of times you can even skip the wash. I'm not saying that we want to do that, but functionally and for killing bed bugs, if you just go straight to the dryer, that will work because it's really the heat that's getting after them. Of course, we want to wash linens that have bed bugs in them. So hot water is going to be the most conservative approach, but cold water is largely effective as well, especially if it's cold water with any kind of detergent in it. It will kill any hatched bugs. However, it's those eggs that probably will survive that process. So if you're using really hot water, you might kill those eggs. If you're using cold water and any kind of detergent, I would expect some survival from the eggs, but generally speaking, the drying process will get after them. So it really does come down to like how extremely conservative do you want to be, as well as what can those linens withstand? Because we know that, you can't just blast every single fabric type out there with extremely high heat. We recognize that. So I would weigh those options. I would weigh those risks there. The most conservative approach is going to be hot water, hot dryer, but cold water, hot dryer, probably going to get the job done too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I love that we also have some tips for our own selves as we travel and protect our own selves. Fantastic. Well, I know we are at time. So this is a wrap. If you are on the lookout for more great educational content from Ecolab, scan this QR code for on-demand hospitality webinars. We really appreciate you all joining us today and hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.